Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I wanted to recommend some underrated nonfiction books that I think are absolutely excellent. I recently did a recommendations for underrated SFF books, which I will link below, and then I thought, let's do this for some nonfiction books as well. So all of the books that I'm going to recommend today are ones that have under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads, and I thoroughly loved them, so let me talk about them. So first is Trees of Minnesota Field Guide by Stan Tekiela, which has 35 ratings on Goodreads, and I loved this book. So this is really a reference book, but I actually read it all the way through and I really liked it. It is basically a book that I picked up on a vacation to Voyageurs National Park in Minnesota. And it is all about identifying trees. And so it has an entry for each tree and talks about the different aspects of how to identify it. But really, this book also just teaches you how to identify trees in general, how to look at the types of needles it has, or the kind of bark, or the berries, or whatever. And I thought it was really fascinating because I'd never known anything about identifying trees. Stan Tekiela has an entire series of tree and birding and flower and whatever field guides. And so even if you don't want to read this one about trees in Minnesota, there's probably one for something in your region, birds or trees, and you can get that and learn how to identify them. I actually have another one of his books that is all about birds in my region, so that I keep that by my window, and when I see birds outside, I try to identify them. It is so good. I definitely loved this book, and I really recommend you try to get one of these field guides if you're interested in your local nature. Next is Oh Ranger, True Stories from Our National Parks, edited by Mark J. Saferstein, which has 85 ratings on Goodreads. This I really thoroughly enjoyed. This is another one actually that I picked up on vacation to a national park, although I think this was a different national park, probably Crater Lake, and it was such a great read. It's basically sort of like a middle grade, but it is a collection of stories from different park rangers all over the US National Park system, telling stories about being a ranger. And so it's stuff like talking about nature events, so things like dealing with animals, or things like dealing with weather, extreme weather, or things like trying to preserve culture or history or anything. It's just so good. If you have any interest in the national parks or in nature or in stories of interactions with animals, any of that sort of stuff, I really recommend this collection. I am so sad that it doesn't have more ratings because I think it is awesome. Next is From Frazzled to Fabulous, How to Juggle a Successful Career, Fatherhood, Me Time, and Looking Good by the Man Who Has It All. This is hilarious. It is a short little humor book, which is by the man who has it all, and it's basically satire that is looking at gender. So this entire book is written in the way that a lot of books directed at women are written. There's all of this nonfiction self-help out there directed at women, which is like basically how you can have it all. And this satires that by directing it at men and talking about things like, how they can look fresh by putting cucumbers over their eyes, and how they can, just deal with all of life's problems by making sure to hydrate, and all of that advice that is given to women and pushed down their throats. And it is just so bitingly funny to read it with the gender swapped. So I really like this. If you like humor, if you like things that are talking about feminism and gender, I think this is such an excellent book. Next is Showtime at the Apollo by Ted Fox, illustrated and adapted by James Otis Smith, which has 182 ratings on Goodreads. So originally, Ted Fox in the 80s had written a book all about the Apollo Theater and about its history. And a lot of that is based on oral history from many of the people who performed there. This is a release from last year or this year that is all about what was in that book, but adapted to a graphic novel. I love oral histories. I love learning about very kind of micro histories of a specific place or specific event or specific thing. And I loved the way that this is really oral histories of all of those different performers. It is a very dense book, but I loved the illustrations and I loved all of the topics that it covered. It really talked about how the Apollo Theater sort of fit into the history of Harlem, the history of the music scene, and the way that kind of racism works as well. Things like the way that a lot of Black performers would create songs that were then covered by white performers, and the Black performers saw none of the money. And just all of these sorts of things about history and about music, and it really introduced me to a ton of new performers, well, old performers that I hadn't heard about, I didn't know about before, and I loved this book. So I really recommend it if you like history, if you like music. And lastly, I'd like to recommend Women in Sports by Rachel Ignotofsky, which has 544 ratings on Goodreads. Rachel Ignotofsky has an entire series of these books, but this one is basically 50 mini biographies of women who have been impactful in the history of sports. It is illustrated with the coolest illustration style. I really truly adore the way that she illustrates, and they're such good biographies. They're just one page each, and they talk about each woman and how she influenced sport. I think that, I'm not very into sports myself, but I think that especially because women have really had a hard time finding equity in sport, this is a great book to read about, especially because I haven't had much interest or knowledge of sport. All of this was super fascinating, super interesting to me. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I will read anything that Rachel Ignotofsky puts out, and way more people should read this. Okay, so those are a few of my favorite nonfiction books that have under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. If you guys have read any of these, if you're interested, if you have any books that you've read that are underrated in nonfiction that you think I should know about, go ahead, leave me a comment down below.